I think there are four main trends that I can see. One is volatility. There's volatility wherever you look in the world at the moment. A volatility in the equity markets, in the debt markets, the bond markets. The euro crisis hasn't been resolved, and we don't know when it will be. Each step seems to be followed by another meeting and another meeting, and none of them actually take us towards the resolution which we're all looking for. There's the fiscal cliff in the US, and it looks promising, the talks which are being held at the moment, but it's impossible to know what's going to happen until probably we get down to the 11th hour, which is a big overhang on what's going on everywhere else in the world. There's political instability in the Middle East and in many other parts of the world, and that again is weighing down on business confidence. And so, combination of all of those factors makes it an extremely difficult landscape against which to operate as a CFO and as a business leader in general. I think that another key theme is competition. Competition is increasing. It's being driven by the ubiquity of the internet and the much easier spread of ideas and initiatives today than used to be possible in the past. And you have to make sure that your business model is robust and is adapting to those changes, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind and your business will wither. And so therefore that has to be a key area of focus. The CFO needs to get involved in the strategy of the business, and in so doing he or she needs to be able to review competitive forces, decide which ones are going to have the most impact on the business and how to respond to them effectively. I think then there's this whole question of risk, which is a big theme right now. That there are a number of risks facing businesses. Reputational risk, again, driven by the internet and by social media. The immediacy of information and the ubiquity of information is such that the level of risk which businesses face if they don't treat their customers correctly, fairly, is much higher than it ever was before. There is risk around the business activities, whether they're being pursued ethically, whether the right controls are in place in order to ensure that the business is going to sort of protect all of its stakeholders and the funds which it generates and maximise those rather than seeing them leak away through poor practices. So I think that being able to have an effective assessment of those risks and then good external and internal audit plans to assess those risks is another key role which the CFO has to play. And then finally there's globalisation. It's a cliche, but it is a factor which affects all of our lives. We deal with suppliers from across the globe. Many businesses are now outsourcing all or part of their finance processing functions to distant parts of the world, and that means, theoretically at least, that it becomes more difficult to ensure that there is good control over those outsourced functions, and that the finance function left behind, so to speak, in headquarters is operating effectively with these kind of distant assets which have been put in place. So all of that presents a challenge, and put all four of those together, and I think the CFO's role has become far more complex than it ever was before. One of the big ones is obviously managing costs. There was a recent survey by the ACCA which showed that CFOs are predominantly looking at cost control rather than at growth. Come back to that in a moment, but certainly in the business of which I'm CFO, we have a major focus on cost, because the top line is under pressure, and to protect ourselves against unforeseen eventualities which may come in the future and increasing competition, we have to make sure that we are keeping costs under control so that we can maintain the bottom line insofar as we can. And so we've got a big cost control agenda across the entire business. Every single function is looking at how much it spends, what it spends it on, and making sure that it spends it wisely. And where we are making capital expenditure, we go through a rigorous assessment of each individual project, looking at its IRR and then ranking those IRRs against each other so that we make sure that we're investing in those projects which are going to create the greatest return for the business. I think also, as I said earlier, there has to, however, be a balance between cost control and growth, because obviously growth is going to return one of these days. We don't know exactly how long it will be before we see sustainable growth in the major economies of the world, but it is going to come back, and obviously we have to take advantage of opportunities that we see for growth, and so therefore the finance function can't simply confine itself to being the gatekeeper, the keeper of the keys to the cash box. It's also got to participate fully in the strategic direction of the business, and making sure that opportunities which come up are evaluated and then given the finance when that's appropriate. So there has to be that balance between the two things. And then I think also underpinning that is providing insight and analysis to the business, so that the business is taking the right decisions based upon the right data. I think finance has got a really strong role to play in that respect, making sure that when business cases are put together, all of the relevant factors have been taken into account, that the right assumptions insofar as possible have been made, and that the case is robust and capable of challenge, and risks and opportunities have been assessed, and ultimately that the organisation as a whole is going to, insofar as it can, make the right decisions and move in the right direction. I think one critical thing is for the finance function to become embedded in the business. In other words, it's no longer possible to sit in a kind of an ivory tower as a unique function over here, whilst the rest of the business is over here. In the business in which I operate, finance has a finance director within each of the main operational units and a small finance team around that person, and they produce a P&L for those units, and then those are brought up for consolidation at the end of each month. And that's a model which works really well, because those people become true partners. They have a dotted line reporting relationship to the heads of those functions and a direct line reporting relationship to me, and so therefore they're accepted by those functions. They're an integral part of those functions, and they know what's happening in those functions for good or bad. But at the same time, they're still part of the central finance function, and that means that there's a great relationship which is established between finance and each of the individual functions in the business. So I know there are various different levels to which one may go in that respect. Maybe we've gone to one extreme in a sense, but nevertheless for us it works very well. I think. And allied to that, another thing which enables finance to become a valued partner is having the right commercial skills, because it's no longer possible simply to look at things from a purely financial numbers perspective. You need to be able to understand what the business wants to do from a commercial perspective, to understand its products, its services, its pricing, and to be able to give valued insights into the direction which the business should take in those respects, so that rather than simply analysing historically what has been going on, which has traditionally been the function of finance, you go beyond that and then talk about where the business should be going in the future as a result of the analysis which you've performed. And so that, again, I think is extremely important. There's then the question, in order to support both that commercial approach and being able to produce the results of the business, having good IT capability, and that means having an excellent ERP system, but that's kind of standard. You obviously have to have that to function effectively as a finance department. But going beyond that, having a good data warehousing capability and people within finance who know how to access that warehouse in order to get the necessary reports to provide the insights to the business which I was talking about earlier. And finally, I think that that ultimately it's the role of the CFO, but also everybody in finance, to build effective relationships across the business at all levels, in order to ensure that finance gets the right kind of credibility and reputation to be able to be effective within the business. So it's no longer seen as a distant function sitting on its own, analysing the historic results of the business, but is truly seen as a valued business partner that can contribute to the future success of the business. I think the talent agenda is vital, as it is in every function in the business. In finance today, we were talking earlier about the fact that to be an effective business partner, finance people have got to understand the commercial realities of the business. So they have to have a strong commercial streak, as well as being highly experienced in the essentials of finance. And I'm glad to say that in the business where I am CFO, we've got some very strong people who have that kind of commercial acumen, and who I hope will move into senior commercial roles in due course. So I think that identifying people with that kind of potential is extremely important. And unfortunately, as an ACCA recent survey said, the development of talent in finance functions can be very ineffective, and so I think that's got to be a critical area of focus, making sure that you've got the right talent coming through, so that you can develop your people, rotate them through other functions in the business, maybe bring them back again in the future, and have strong people coming through to take their place. So that has to be a critical part of the CFO's agenda. I think also this is made more complex by the advent of shared services. I was talking earlier about the fact that many finance departments are outsourcing their back office activities, and many of their accounts processing activities as well. And those functions are in many different parts of the world, which leads to management challenges, but also talent development challenges. So identifying good people there who could be brought to head office, or people from head office who could go there to run those functions. And how do you cope with the smaller scale of the head office function when so much has been transferred out into these shared services functions? There are real challenges there too. And then finally, I would point to diversity as being a critical issue, and in this sense I'm not just talking about gender diversity, but also age diversity, to get the right mix of skills. I'm talking about ethnic diversity and basically diversity of views, because if everybody in the finance function thinks exactly the same way, then you're not going to appreciate those kind of challenges, which are going to be just around the corner. You need people who are going to think outside the box. And so diversity of all forms is something which I really think we've got to foster within the finance department.